Welcome everyone. Let's dive into the world of podcasting, where it's kind of like podcasts are emerging as the new blogs, right?
Absolutely. I mean, just look at the numbers. You've got thousands of active podcasts, and even though only a minority of Americans have listened, the platform is exploding.
Right. Exactly. There's this golden age moment happening now, kind of like how blogs exploded back in the mid-2000s.
Yeah.
One of the highlights is how groundbreaking shows like Serial captured millions, and now they're pushing forward with more seasons.
And don't you love how Serial, despite being a true crime narrative, opened up the whole medium to a much wider audience?
Yeah, it's almost like a turning point. Listen, it's like the moment when blogs went from niche hobbies to mainstream media empires. Back then, we saw businesses trying to understand this new format, and now companies like the New York Times are seriously dipping their toes into podcasting.
True. There's a parallel here, like the transition from personal blogs to digital empires. But the big question is, will podcasts sustain this initial hype? Or are we just in a bubble that'll, eventually burst?
That's exactly the debate.
Yeah.
The article hints that the golden age of podcasting might be here for a brief period, similar to blogs from a decade ago. It's a double-edged sword. On one hand, there's creative freedom, and on the other, discoverability is still a major hurdle.
I mean, if you're listening to a podcast that you really like, it's hard to share it or find more like it, right? The lack of a simple WordPress equivalent for podcasts is a challenge.
Right, exactly. Without an easy platform for discovery, it's like you're trying to spot a needle in a haystack. Podcasts have become this innovative, cutting-edge medium, yet the infrastructure for sharing and, easy publishing is still catching up.
And there's another factor. Production costs. Take Serial, for example. It's known to be really expensive to produce, right? We saw that the narrative and investigative effort is not something a casual podcaster can just whip up in a weekend.
Yeah, that's a big point. Producing a high-quality narrative podcast is resource-intensive. You might get some voices that sound amazing, but there's significant investment involved to capture that same quality as what we saw with shows produced by veterans from This American Life.
So, in that sense, it's kind of a high-risk, high-reward scenario, isn't it? Some podcasts might never break even if they appeal to a niche audience.
Precisely. And then there's the advertising model. CPM rates for podcasts are through the roof compared to, say, YouTube. Some high-end podcasts average near $25 per thousand impressions, and a few even hit almost $100. Of course, you have to question if that will remain sustainable as the market matures.
Yeah, I can see how an economist might say, okay, that's cool now, but what if the novelty diminishes? As analytics improve, we might see those numbers adjust, maybe even fall.
Right. The article throws down the gauntlet. While podcasts are currently commanding a captive, engaged audience, there's an underlying uncertainty if, the big ad dollars will last when the space gets even more crowded.
It's interesting you bring up crowding because that's another challenge. Podcast discoverability. I mean, when you have roughly 180,000 active podcasts, without a robust platform guiding you to them, it's, sort of the Wild West of audio content.
Exactly. And it's funny to think about. The blogs back in 2005 had their own discovery issues until platforms like Google and aggregators evolved. Now podcasting is in that early phase where there's a mix of highly produced hits and a huge tail of amateur efforts.
Right, exactly. But here's a thought. Could this fragmentation actually be a blessing in disguise? I mean, it might encourage innovation around search and curation tools in the podcast space.
That's a good point. It's almost like, the chaos of early internet days before things finally settled into a neat ecosystem. Sure, it's messy, but it allows for creativity and unbridled exploration.
I get that perspective, but I wonder if the average listener might be deterred by this cluttered environment. For advertisers, wouldn't a more streamlined audience segmentation be more appealing?
True, that's a solid critique. The fragmentation could lead to, well, an oversaturation where the advertisement dollars might seep away. Companies might then start to question the efficiency of spending on ads if only a tiny fraction of listeners really engage.
And then there's the matter of measuring true listener engagement. The article touched on that too, how podcasts command captured attention because you're, less likely to switch screens. But without solid analytics, can we really quantify that value in the long run?
That's exactly the conundrum. It's like, you might be listening intently, but how does that translate into return on investment for an advertiser? It's somewhat similar to billboard advertising in a digital age.
Yeah. And it makes me think about historical trends. We can see parallels with blogs where initially everyone could be a publisher, and later a small group of professional companies took over.
Yeah, it's almost like history repeating itself. Podcasts might just follow that same trajectory. First, huge waves of enthusiasm, then a period where market forces start weeding out the less compelling content.
I do wonder though, what do you think about the democratizing nature of podcasts? I mean, anyone with a laptop and a mic can start one? Doesn't this offer a kind of cultural diversity that more refined platforms might lose?
Oh, for sure. That's one of the best parts. Just like early blogs, podcasts allow for a flood of voices, from niche interests like stamp collecting to in-depth cultural analysis. It's a vibrant ecosystem, rich with personal narrative and authenticity.
But it does raise the question, when the hype fades, will we see a consolidation where only a few big players dominate, leaving little room for that grassroots appeal?
I think that's a possibility. It's like the natural evolution of any medium. The early days are wild and unstructured, but eventually, market forces and listener habits will push towards a handful of polished shows, reminiscent of the digital empires built from early blogs.
Right, yeah. And there's that skeptical side to it, kind of a cautionary tale that the growth phase might be temporary. Reminds me of the saying, enjoy the golden age while it lasts.
Exactly. And from a business perspective, that golden age is a double-edged sword. It attracts investment and ad dollars, which is great, but it also puts pressure on creators to maintain high production values at a time when perhaps the democratized, raw versions are what truly define the medium.
That's a tough balance to strike. On one hand, advertisers want polished, engaging narratives, but on the other, the charm of podcasts often comes from their, authentic imperfection.
Yeah, it's like when you're listening to a friend tell a really good story. The little pauses, the hesitations add character, and podcasts capture that in spades.
Yeah. Right, it's that raw authenticity that can be both a selling point and a challenge for mass media adoption.
Exactly. And while we're on the topic, did you notice how the article also compared podcasting to blogs from a decade ago? Back then, everyone jumped on the bandwagon until, well, reality set in. It makes you wonder if we're going to see similar consolidation here in a few years.
Definitely. But I also, think that the technological improvements, like that iOS update that made the podcast icon more prominent, could spur a more refined ecosystem in the long run.
That's a good point. It's like the tipping point that helped podcasts cross over from being just a niche interest to a cultural fixture. Once you have more intuitive discovery and easier sharing tools, the growth could be exponential.
Yeah, exactly. There's, so much potential here, but the challenge will be in, preserving that initial creative freedom while building a solid infrastructure.
Right. It's a balancing act between innovation and, standardization. And honestly, it's exciting to watch. The unpredictability is part of the fun, like being on the frontier of a new digital revolution.
Absolutely. And, while challenges certainly exist, like high production costs, uneven audience discovery, and unsustainable ad rates if overhyped, the potential for genuine, authentic storytelling is enormous.
Yeah, and if creatives can harness that raw, remarkable potential, we might just see podcasting address niche audiences in ways that traditional media never could. I mean, who wouldn't want to hear a podcast about, say, stamp collecting, right?
Exactly. Definitely. And the landscape will also force a more critical look at the economics behind content creation and, the true value of audience engagement.
Right. So, whether it's a fleeting golden era or the start of a durable new medium, it's clear that podcasts are, reshaping how we absorb and interact with content.
Yes, indeed. Well, here's to hoping that this vibrant, messy period fuels something truly revolutionary, for both creators and audiences alike.
Absolutely. Stay tuned and keep listening, because the future of storytelling might just be unfolding right at your earbuds.